Streaming and the rockets break clear, the bombs bursting in air, keep through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
What a beautiful rendition of that song, The Star Spangled Banner. Thank you, everyone that's being with us. We had a few technical issues right in the very beginning, but I think our team is taking care of that. So now we're going to have My Country 'Tis of Thee. And Mary, I think you're going to key that up for us.
One moment, one moment, one moment.
My country 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrims come, from every mountain side. 'Tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrims come, from every mountain side. Let freedom ring. O'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Mary, for putting up beautiful song up. And we're going to move on to panel one because we're already running a little late. And this is called Resisting Ethnicity, Tensions Through Inclusive Democracy, Diversity, and the Application of Migration Theories in Africa. I think we already have the main names and their bios up. Is that correct, Mary? Can you respond back to me?
So they are.
Okay, and so as our presenters are sharing with us, you'll have their bios from the chat. And Matthew, are you here? Is Matthew Choa here?
Yes,
Yeah, he's here.
Yes, Matthew, how are you? Welcome. Again, Matthew's biography is actually in the chat, and we're going to head and I'm going to be timing. And since we are actually getting started late, Matthew, could you share with us for about 10 minutes instead of the original 15 minutes? And we're going to hold the Q&A until the end after all the speakers finished, if that's okay with each of the speakers. So Matthew, why don't you give us about a 30-second bio for you? That's what we call the elevator speech. Your name, very short bio, and then let's go in right into your presentation for 10 minutes, and I will be timing.
Okay, thank you so very much. I would like to extend my gratitude for this opportunity. I hope I'm audible. Am I audible?
We can't hear you,
Yes, we
Matthew, and Mary.
Yes,
my
we
name
can
is
hear
still
him.
coming up for everyone.
Yeah, I can hear, so, but yeah, go ahead.
Yep.
Okay, my name is Ian Matthew, and I am a literatee, a psychologist, and a curriculum specialist. That's all I can say for now.
And go right into your speech, Matthew.
Okay, thank you so very much.
Glad to have you with us.
I've been tasked and shouldered responsibility to tackle the discourse, or in fact, if I would love to call it, migration theories in Africa. But before I could go further a little bit, I would naturally want to start a little bit with the cipher on decoding of some of the terms that would operationally or theoretically appear from time to time. One of these key terms is migration, and the other is ethnic group, which I will be alternately or simultaneously using people from time to time, and so forth. And it's very important that we read from the same page. And so I would like to start with the term migration itself. Simply, it donates or refers to movement from a place to another. And of course, with the intentions of settling. The reason could be on the basis of moving voluntarily or involuntarily, or rather for better living conditions. Or if should it be for other reasons, such as other factors, economic, political, or whatever, or economic spatially, it would be actually a push-pull factor on the other hand. What attracts, what gravitates, or on the other hand, what forces to. And the reasons could be invasion, conquest, colonizations, and so forth. Now, people usually move on individual basis or family basis or large units. This is just to decipher the term migration generally with, of course, the immigrants and the immigrants, those that move from their country of the origin and where they move onto, and vice versa, if possible. The other term I would like to decipher so that we also read on the same page is the ethnic group, because there are other terms that are wrongly used in most cases, such as Tibich or tribe, which is Middle English usually, to refer to ethnic group. However, I prefer the ethnic group, which simply denotes a group of people sharing a common culture, and that's very basic, as we shall be talking about, having the same history and conjoined ancestry. Now, these three characteristics are very important for the generations to come and moving forth. But what's very important is not just to give us a long speech on the history. There must be a good reason for us to be able to speak about the issue of migration theories, so that we also draw lots of lessons or sundry of lessons on the other hand. That's the main reason. And so I would like to start with realities that are generally relatable to the issue of migration. Now, when immigrants, for example, when they leave their country and becoming immigrants, or on another way, entering another country, what happens usually in their movement is that the intention in most cases is two reasons: either good conditions or they are forced to. On the other hand, for reasons, and of course they can be environmental, ecological, they can be political, they can be economic, and on and on. Now, on the other hand, people have other reasons to move, as I have mentioned earlier. But of course, for migration to take place, there are usually push and pull factors, and it is the same on the same corner. What pushes and what pulls you, attracts you to the other end, where you decide to go or you have been obliged unto. And in most cases, pull factors, on the other hand, are the expectations unnecessarily being invaded or forced or conquest on the other hand. And that's where I'll be shortly giving some examples of, taking Africa as an example. Of course, there are so many theories that challenge or that contradict each other to reach into. And of course, because they lost most of the theorists, it's lost from different philosophies when it comes to talking about Africa, even when generally we talked about theories of human migration. One of these is cultural based. Now, cultural based theories, like for example, if we take a Bantu group that sometime left some years ago, but before I could speak about that, I would like to remind our people that I'm not going to speak about prehistory Africa, simply because it would take a lot of our time.
Matthew, we got 5 minutes. 5 minutes left.
Okay. And so these theories are cultural based. Now, the ones that are cultural based, like the Bantus sharing a language, and this is a language that started originally from Fanuka. This is the origin language when they moved from what is known Cameroon today and some parts of Nigeria and Ghana, or sometime back it was Ghanaian Kingdom or Ashanti that spoke Twi, and they move in two ways. And they have the same similarities or variants of their tongues until when the first Niger-Congo group that got into the lakes today and mingles with the Nilotes or the Nilotics, and another group which is sometimes believed to be a Bantu, but not originally a Bantu, because it's one of the groups that is stayed actually in the lakes region, and it is called Batwa. They are very small today in southern western parts of Uganda. And then another group also moved towards, so the group that came through Congo, that is Niger-Congo A, and they got some pygmies there, which are the original groups that they mingled with. Of course, as they mingled with, they added a culture, they went further, that's very basic. The culture that they came with, they learned, and it's really very important in this dialogue of a voice exchange of culture. The second thing is theories that are faith-based, things that are related to whether we started anti-pyramidic as human beings or as Africans. or the issue of the creationist or evolutionist. These are generally health theorists that talked also, but in most cases, they are dwelling on prehistorical Africa, which I'm not going to touch a lot. Now, the economic base is also related to these groups. For example, if you take the Koshites and the Oxamite groups, which is Ethiopia today, Tigray, some of the parts of Eastern Sudan, and until the Red Sea, that mingles with some of the Arabs or Afro-Asiatic groups that later became today. Now, this mingled for economic groups. So they were sharing also the issues of trade and commerce, and they mingled, and they formed this group today as a theory. This is just to give an example. Then the groups that are geographical based, this is also another theory, and the genographic based. And the genographic base is strongly important because it's a kind of a study that is based on the DNAs of the African groups, like the Bantu health groups. They are not just because of culture and because of language related or because of religion, but because of the strength also of the DNA. If you take, for example, the Twi groups also, or the Ashanti sometimes they would call, or Ghana Mali, further north. These are different old civilizations and antique civilizations that also mingled. Now, what is it that we want to learn from all these theories that are based? Of course, they have got so many different names, but what do we want to learn in order for us to conclude? Now, these groups, first of all, diminished that mentality of living in oneness. New thing has been introduced to Africa through migration, and that is unity in diversity. It is true that some of these migrations caused some wars, but these wars ended into accepting each other, and that is the second lesson to learn. Not only living in unity of diversity, but also verily learning to be tolerant to each other, accepting each other, and the notion of who is the indigenous group and who is not is starting to diminish a little bit. And I believe that is the general idea which is related today to Pan-Africanism, of course, with some corrections of getting away from the psychology of the oppressed, of always, tending to blame others that this happened or whatever happened, or being emulative or imitative to the culture of the oppressed. Now, again, the partnership is an element that has been also learned in most cases in the issue of migration. And the question is, who in Africa today can ever claim to be indigenous and not the other? Now, if we take that and we decide, for example, to take the Bantus back, do you think will the current Cameroon or Ghana today take them? If we talked about the Nilotics and Betwa who settle around the Nile, and we want to take them back where they are, and even bring some of them further from South Egypt, or we decide, for example, by a certain authority, and we decide to take away the Berber group or the Koshite group, will the Nubi be taken away from East Africa today? Especially that there are very genographic studies that proved actually that the majority of the human beings around the world came from East Africa. This is genographic. This is not just a fiction. And there are strong evidence on that. Now, this is to suggest that humans have to actually accept each other, whether they are white, whether they are black, whether they are brown, whether they are green, whatever the color is, as we wish to call each other. Of course, the idea is not to allow to talk about a lot of history, but in these occasions, as we celebrate July 4th, is to remind us, first of all, as humans and Africans particularly, that we can ever live together and learn from the theorists of migration to accept each other, to learn to be united in diversity, which is in a lot of similarity if you see the history of the United States of America. Not only that, even beyond Americana Latina, even if you go to Asia, the same thing you would learn. Now, in the last minute, I believe my time is finished, and we might call for interaction, is that with this diversity and richness, the solidarity can only become when you accept me as dark as I am. I accept you as green or as white as you are, or as brown as you are. And it doesn't mean anything. The other element is Africa became what is Africa today simply because they learned that they needed each other. And this is actually an element of everyone can add an element to create who we are. This is not only that, but it goes beyond as to who we are as human beings. And I believe time has come that if this is taken into consideration and people deep is lost into migration theories, taking Africa as an example, or America, or Latina Americana, there are so many lessons that can ever be drawn. And in the end, I beseech with all of you that we take time to study our roots. Now, not to create divisions, but we need to study our roots so that we learn how we came together. Did we have to unnecessarily come together as one race? Is it important that we come together just as colors? Is it important that we should be a melting pot as humanities? These are the questions that I would like to leave us to think about. Thank you so very much.
And thank you. Let's see. Mary, we're going to introduce the other speakers. Can you, please.
Okay.
And
so,
8 minutes.
Okay. So I know Mary from my work with TASS, the Torture, Abolition, and Survivor Support Coalition, where I've been the advocacy program manager for 7 years. But today I'm not representing TASS because I'm going to be talking about my own political perspective. So I'm not representing my organization. I'm speaking only for myself today. I wanted to make some remarks about ethnic conflict in Africa, followed by a few observations about religious conflict in the Middle East, and then the hyperpolarized political environment here in the United States. So with over 3,000 ethnic groups and more than 2,000 languages, Africa has been plagued by ethnic conflict that's often escalated into violence. This compares to Europe, which has 300 ethnic groups and 200 languages. Over 1 million people died in Nigeria's civil war in the 1960s. 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus were massacred in the Rwanda genocide, and up to 300,000 people in the Darfur genocide. An estimated 400,000 people were killed in the ethnic violence in South Sudan, which exploded just 2 years after it became an independent country. These are just a few examples from the recent past. Now we see ongoing ethnic violence in Ethiopia, which Dunya also spoke to, which pains me greatly because the majority of the torture survivors I have known in my job are from Ethiopia. The greatest suffering has been in the northern province of Tigray, but family members of survivors, torture survivors from the Amhara ethnic group that I know have been persecuted and even killed by ethnic extremists only because of their ethnicity. In Ethiopia, as is often the case in ethnic violence in Africa and all over the world, we've seen systematic rape and starvation used as weapons of war and millions of people displaced from their homes. We've seen traditional media like radio and TV and social media spread hatred instead of connecting people, which was what Facebook was supposed to do when it was founded in 2004. Religious conflict can be just as deadly as ethnic conflict. In the United States, we've mostly seen nonviolent forms of religious conflict, frequently about so-called cultural issues, like gay rights and abortion. But in the Middle East, religious conflict has resulted in horrendous violence, often committed by jihadist organizations like the Islamic State, battling against Muslim populations who do not want to follow their extremist interpretations of Islam. One of the worst cases of religious violence in the Middle East, of course, was the genocide of the Yazidi people of northern Iraq. In 2014, ISIS, the Islamic State, killed thousands of Yazidis simply because of their religion. Yazidis follow their own ancient faith. Yazidi men who refused to convert to Islam were executed, and approximately 7,000 women and girls were forced into sexual slavery. Now I'd like to speak about political division in the United States and one way that people can try to bridge this divide. This is where I'm speaking as a partisan person and not as a representative of my organization. I'm repeating that a second time. Since the election of Donald Trump, the United States has become extremely polarized, more than I've ever seen in my lifetime. Democrats and Republicans do not just disagree with each other. They see each other as an existential threat to the United States. I identify as a blue, a Democrat. I do not have any friends or any family members who are Trump supporters, or even never Trumper Republicans. But I decided I wanted to meet and expose myself to Republicans, to those think different from me, the other political tribe. So in 2019, I joined Braver Angels, a national citizens movement to bring Democrats and Republicans, the Reds and the Blues, together at the grassroots level. The goal is not to change each other's political affiliation, but to understand each other better and reduce the hatred that pervades America's political culture. Braver Angels organizes debates, workshops, discussion groups, and provides tools to participants about how to engage the other side. Run by trained moderators, everybody has a chance to listen and be heard. Police reform, gun control versus gun rights, racism in America, and abortion are a few of the extremely controversial topics that we've covered. One of my favorite activities with Braver Angels was a one-on-one conversation with Mike, a conservative Republican very different from me. He lives in a small rural community in Montana near the Canadian border. He bought a gun when he was 9 years old with the money he saved distributing newspapers. I have never owned a gun, never will, and never want to. Mike is very worried about cheating in elections. I'm worried about voter suppression by Republican state legislatures. Mike and I had to follow a conversation guide that gave us specific instructions about how to interact with each other. Everything was going fine and we were following all the rules, but then we came to an item that Mike just said, I don't want to follow this. He was supposed to criticize his tribe, the Trump supporters, for something, anything that they had done that was wrong. And Mike said, Andrea, I'm so sorry. I can't think of anything that they've done that's wrong. Are you okay with that? So I said, well, I had planned to criticize my tribe, the Democrats. I was going to say, I'm sorry that too many Democrats stereotype all Republicans as white supremacists, anti-Semites, uneducated people who worship at the altar of Donald Trump. And I was going to say, of course, not all Republicans are like that. And, you know, that's wrong of me to make that assumption. But if Mike wasn't going to criticize his side, I certainly was not going to unilaterally surrender and criticize my side. So neither of us criticized our side. So what does any of this have to do with ethnic violence in Africa, religious conflict in the Middle East, or almost any kind of conflict? It's about acknowledging what your side, your ethnic group, your religious group, and your political tribe has done wrong. It's about being courageous and honest enough to admit when your side has to apologize for what it has done, almost like an informal type of truth and reconciliation. In Ethiopia, for instance, the Ethiopian government and most of the ethnic groups involved in the current war are guilty of some human rights abuses. Some, of course, much, much worse than others. Could be ethnic cleansing, rape, other forms of sexual violence, denying food to suffering people, preventing ambulance from reaching people who need medical
Andrea,
help.
1 minute, please.
while the other side may have committed horrendous atrocities, to unite the country, and I'm concerned about Ethiopia, just like Dunya, people must be willing to stop denying abuses carried out by their side. That is what's hard. What has your side done that's wrong? Similarly, on July 4th, people like me, dyed-in-the-wool Democrats, we have to listen to what the other political tribe, the Republicans, have to say. It may be hard for you all to believe, but this is very, very tough for me, but it's the only way forward, especially on July 4th.
Fantastic, right to the second. Nicely done. Okay. Valerie, Valentina, you're up now. If you want to go ahead and start, and
Yes.
8 minutes, please.
Wonderful. I know Mary again told me 15, but that's fine. I'm just
No, that's what we had originally.
That's
but
right.
We had
But I forgive her.
technology.
She's a friend, so I forgive her for that one.
It's
Okay.
it's
So
okay.
anyway, quickly, I'm going to sort of summarize what I already prepared. So bear with me. It's going to look like a laundry list. And before I'm supposed to be talking about diversity. So I'm looking at the question I'm going to be discussing. Can some African nations turn diversity challenges into trade and economic development opportunities, distilling lessons from the US and some other African countries like Tanzania that have had success stories? Quickly, there are three, or I would say three main questions, or four interrelated questions I'm going to be addressing really fast. Is diversity and, or are diversity and tribalism main drivers of conflict, right? And, or are they symptoms of conflict? And secondly, are there countries that have more diversity that have also handled diversity effectively, okay? In other words, turned those diversity challenges into opportunities. And thirdly, if there are some countries, how can African nations distill lessons from those countries? And what are the solutions? So quickly, with the resurgence of conflicts, as my esteemed, I would say, or distinguished speakers have already alluded to earlier, there have been conflicts and instability in Africa. So the question becomes, what do we do with it? Some experts conceive that ethnic diversity and tribalism are main drivers, right? Some historians also claim that tribalism dates back to colonization. I know my brother, who eloquently, presented, I think it's Matthew, although his name is not Matthew there, I think it's Matthew, right? He talked about the, migration issues and the link and the fact that there are historical dimensions to linkages between, African nations, or African tribes, so to speak, turned into ethnic tribes, so to speak. But evidence suggests that tribalism is not the main driver of conflict, but it's a symptom of underlying structural, institutional, economic, and environmental insecurity problems. You see, most parts of the world, including the USA and Europe, have more diverse populations, but the experiences suggest that there is political and economic strength in promoting ethnic diversity, right? The Western nations, no doubt, they do not have perfect ethnic and race discrimination records, but they are devising and implementing legal and policy mechanisms to turn any diversity challenges into trade, economic, and geopolitical opportunities, okay? There are also success stories, as I mentioned earlier. I mentioned Tanzania. Therefore, regardless of various claims about the roots and the drivers of tribalism, Africa must bear in mind socioeconomic conditions and should distill lessons from successful case studies in those other countries. Let me say, for example, the US of citizens, more, as my esteemed panelist, Andrea, mentioned, she was talking about debating political differences. But the US has devised a way, because the US is deeply entrenched. It has a democratic system that's, abides by a system of checks and balances, okay? And when we think about it, Caucasians are also ethnic. from various global Western regions, Italy, Germany, Poland, France, England. Therefore, the US has a broader spectrum of ethnic category than African nations, including diverse white ethnic majority, diverse Black ethnic majority, and other ethnic minority groups from around the globe. The country has its own share of tribalism and racism, as I mentioned earlier, but its citizens, and it also has citizens from very Caucasian ethnic groups. They've cast aside, the Caucasians have actually cast aside ethnic differences to unite as what we call whites to achieve their economic goals and retain power as dominant majority in the country. And to combat slavery-based racism, the US also fought and moved beyond its civil war, 1861 to 1865, to unite as one union with a diverse populace. Today, we're happy to celebrate, 4th of July. The US shares that with Africa in terms of being a post-colonial nation, and yet it's been able to achieve unity and has been able to conquer some level. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's able to turn diversity challenges into opportunities, right? For example, the US continues to welcome immigrants from various diverse religious, national origin, ethnic, gender, racial, social backgrounds into their country. What do they use? Various strategies. Let's give an example: merit-based visas, H-1B, immigrant investment visas, EB-5 and EB-2. Those are just a few examples. Okay, it recognizes the power and strength of diversity, large populations, including geopolitical and economic advantage, military strength, innovation, wealth creation, large economies of scale, large consumer and labor market. The list goes on. But I will, during Q&A, I can answer that. I only have 8 minutes, so let me, move very fast. So optimistically, let's just look at an African country, Julius Nyerere, for instance. During his administration, he recognized the value of diversity. We all know about the Ujamaa policy, social economic policies, and also the one common indigenous Swahili language that he introduced, right? And this was in 1922 to 1999, and also 1964 to 1985. Therefore, bearing in mind the varied socioeconomic, political, and historical conditions, African nations can distill, I believe that African nations can distill positive lessons from such countries that are promoting diversity well. They should have, they should recognize the value of diversity, implement measures to reduce tribalism and to achieve common goal of economic prosperity. Such measures, I'll just give a quick laundry list: adopt state of birth, okay, state of birth, not ancestral origin, state of birth requirements for ethnic identity, just like the US does. Combat underlying economic and environmental insecurity, including human, food, and water insecurity that drive ethnic conflict. Third, introduce local languages into K to 12th grade curriculum. Adopt an open border immigration policy for all African diasporans in the world. Capitalize on comparative advantages of various ethnic regions in their respective countries, including strengthening SMEs, trade, infrastructure,
Valentina,
agriculture.
1 minute.
Okay, thank you. You see how I'm talking so fast?
You're doing a good
economic
job. Keep it up.
development. And then sixth, implement educational curriculum that includes negative ramifications of civil war, historical, cultural conditions, scientific achievements, vocational education, social entrepreneurship, confidence in local culture, patriotism, and unity, sort of like the Ubuntu concept in South Africa, and the value of diverse groups. Last but not the least, adopt and implement a national youth employment policy that promotes youth employment from all ethnic backgrounds and eliminates phantom aid phenomena that undermines local human capital, and strengthen human rights protection and enforcement machineries for all peoples. Thank you. I had to talk very fast. Mary, I won't forgive you for this, but I'm glad I did it
You
anyway.
did a fantastic job. Time is becoming a hard thing. As a matter of fact,
I did it in 9.
No, you did a
9 minutes.
fantastic job, really.
Hey, Valentine, you were too within. You actually finished 3 seconds early. So
excellent.
you
In the advancing time issue, we are just going to give them 1 minute to introduce themselves, and they hit the floor because we have very many speakers and time is becoming against us.
No, we've been doing that. We actually give them 30 seconds.
Okay.
But we just need Lawrence's bio.
Yeah, it will.
Okay. You have it? Lawrence, are you here?
I am.
Okay, great. Good to see you again.
Yes, it is.
All right, it's good to be together. Okay, let's see. I think we have your bio up by 8 minutes, and Lawrence, let's go.
Okay, it's very good to see everyone. I've been involved in Africa for many years, and in the last few months, I've made several trips to Cote d'Ivoire, Ethiopia, and Nigeria. I have a very good understanding of some of the issues on the continent, and what I think I'll bring up today is the relationship between the United States, representing July 4th celebration, and dealing with some of the difficulties in Africa. Because as I realize in many visits I make to Africa, among meeting with poor people and some people doing a little bit better, the basic question facing African people, which is a direct, has a direct input into ethnic confrontation, is the lack of the commodities and necessities of life: water, food, electricity, railroads. When governments cannot provide these necessities, then the conditions in their country will worsen. And therefore, we should proceed to ensure that actually poverty and hunger are eliminated in Africa. That would have a great, giant step forward to eliminating ethnic confrontations and actually war, and would bring stability. Many people have talked for years about a Marshall Plan for Africa. In fact, the Marshall Plan could not be applied exactly the way it was in Europe for Africa. Germany correctly used these funds from the United States as a capital base to reindustrialize their economy. And they were, to my mind, the success story of the Marshall Fund. But in Africa, we don't have the same situation. In Africa, we actually don't have industrialized countries. We have very small manufacturing sectors. And therefore, the model that is probably better to be examined for Africa would be the American system of political economy, which was developed by Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary Treasurer of George Washington. And Hamilton understood that to take a country with 13 colonies that had almost $100 million in debt in those days, and 90% agrarian based, had to be transformed, and we had to build a manufacturing sector. And he used the creation of a national bank to establish credit for infrastructure development, and he advocated the protective tariffs be used to develop the industries in the United States so they would be independent, economically sovereign, from having to be manipulated by the British producing cheap goods and dumping them in the United States. And Africa has many of those same problems today. Without infrastructure, we're not going to be able to develop the country. And there will not be peace, there will not be democracy, and there will not be stability. I recently had the opportunity to listen to an interview by Owala Rashid, CEO of Nigeria-based African Railway Conference. And he was going through all the developments of railroads, which he called a silent revolution in Africa. And he said all friends of Africa would invest in infrastructure, and that the greatest thing that can be done for Africa is hard infrastructure to eliminate poverty. And on these questions, I absolutely agree with him. Also, Roland Atunuba has advocated an African integrated high-speed rail network. This is the direction that we have to go if we're going to eliminate poverty and build up manufacturing sectors that can deliver the physical necessities of life that African people depend on. Now, I've been working with a group of people, including Mary and others on this discussion, to create an African infrastructure bank. That is a bank that would establish a capital base that would lend a portion of the capital stock as credit to African nations to build infrastructure, primarily railroads, electricity, roads, etc. And that the soft infrastructure would come after hard infrastructure, because the hard infrastructure would produce economic growth. And therefore you would have a profit in the economy, and the growth of that economy could then make the investments which are absolutely necessary in soft infrastructure. It doesn't have to be that rigorous, but without this infrastructure investment, you won't have any economic growth. You'll just be talking about handouts and USAID and other emergency measures, which are absolutely necessary, but they won't change the dynamic. One of the things that people in Africa fight over is food, is land, is water. And you go to ethnic fault lines where one brother will kill another from another ethnic group because he's searching out a way to fight for the means of existence for his family. These conditions have to be removed, and that people have to unite around a common interest of their nation, the development of their nation. I spent a lot of time in Ethiopia. I know the situation well. And the best thing that can go on in Ethiopia is to continue the economic development and to have a dialogue in Ethiopia where ethno-nationalism and ethnicity is discussed in terms of the importance of an Ethiopian citizenry, an Ethiopian identity. What is in the interest of building our nation? The same thing in Nigeria. I'd spent weeks and months in Nigeria and dealing with the conflicts between ethnic groups, especially Yoruba, Igbo, and Hausa. And they're still fighting today, 60 years or so after their freedom, to establish a Nigerian identity. Now, what's the identity of a nation? The development of its people, the increase in the productive labor of the people, to increase their wealth and physical wealth, so that more people have a higher standard of living. Those are the requirements and obligations of a nation, and all people share in them. My essential view on economics actually is metaphysical. It's the mind. Each human being born anywhere in the world, providing they're human, which we are, not animals, we have endowed with the creative power to think and reason beyond the level of logic. We can make discoveries. That unique quality of human beings is what a nation must nurture and develop, and makes us all alike. We are more similar than we are dissimilar if we understand that our human power of creativity is our primary value on this earth. And therefore a nation, if it's functioning—
Larry, 1 minute.
If a nation is functioning, it will provide for the physical well-being of its people, while at the same time, it's nurturing the creative aspects, creativity of the mind through education and culture. And this is the only way that we're going to solve these problems in Africa. And the Alexander Hamilton National Bank proposal, an American system proposal, which very few Americans understand, and less people around the world understand. I do understand, and I'm trying to bring that understanding to Africa, because this is actually a model that we can use to develop the continent and realize the great potential of Africa. Thank you.
I'm going to take the prerogative because we've had all of our speakers make their basic presentation. What I want to do is ask one question each. It's all going to be about the best practices that have come out of your research. So I'm going to start with Matthew. Matthew, I'll give you 1 minute. Everybody gets 1 minute. So what would be the 2 or 3 best practices from your research that you started with your presentation?